So, Melissa, can you explain at the 30,000 foot level how a resume is used in the hiring process from submission, when somebody submits their resume, all the way to when they're actually hired for a position?
Okay, Randy, I really appreciate that you asked that. Um, First thing that's important to understand is at the very high level, the hiring process has pretty much the same function as the first couple of weeks of boot camp. In other words, it's designed to weed out as many people as possible. So when you first hit the apply button, your resume is reviewed by an artificial intelligence based, but not very smart computer system. It's called the applicant tracking system. You'll often hear it referred to as ATS. It's designed to reject 95% of all people who apply to a given job. If you make it through ATS, then human resources, usually a very entry-level employee or maybe even an intern, skims your resume. And when I say skim, I'm talking spending at most 30 seconds on your resume. Average is anywhere between 7 to 10 seconds. If human resources thinks that your resume passes the sniff test, it then goes to the desk of the person who, if you're hired, will be your boss. Another term for that person is the hiring manager. It's that person who decides whether or not you get called in for an interview. Then you go through the interview process, and if you succeed there, you're then presented with a job offer.
So, how much of that process is really technology based, either AI or a search filter versus people being involved in the process?
Another great question. I would say that 1/3 is technology based, and the remaining 2/3 is people based in terms of people looking at it, looking at the resume, people interviewing you interacting with people. But what's important to understand is that even though the computer portion of it is only 1/3 of the process, it's like the gates to the base you're stationed on. If you don't have the right credentials, you are not getting through that gate. Is there a way for you to hit pause for a minute?
Go ahead. I'll edit it out.
Okay, I'm just going to mute myself.
Yeah, I'll go back and edit.
Okay, good.
Video,
Yeah, because
so.
I could hear some background noise, and I always assume if I can hear it, the other people can too, even though I've got a really good noise canceling mic. Okay.
So I didn't hear it, so it was okay.
Good. The mic is working.
At any time, just like we did, you want to do a do-over, feel free to say, let me do that again.
Take a sip of water or something.
Take a water, and I'll go back in. And what I do is I edit it, and I'm saying all this because I know I'm going to edit it all out. I'll edit it, put it in some software that brings up in the closed captions so people will see the words that we say, all those good things. So there's a whole process after this that I do to create a video that we can publish out there.
Okay, good. Okay, so I was done with that previous question.
Okay, so then why should go ahead.
Stupid echo. I muted it and it's still talking. We'll just unplug it. Okay.
What is it?
It's an Amazon Echo device.
Oh, Echo, like Amazon, like Alexa or something.
well, yeah, it's like Alexa. It came as part of our Ring security system.
Oh, okay, I understand.
So, like the doorbell broadcasts the video to it, and it reminds me of meetings like this one.
Right. Technology's everywhere. So we'll continue. So why should I create a resume? Isn't LinkedIn good enough? I mean, why do I need a resume?
Mm-mm. LinkedIn is not good enough because, well, first of all, LinkedIn is used by companies to essentially validate what you say on your resume. Also, every section of LinkedIn has specific character limits. So you may not be able to communicate in LinkedIn what you need to in the resume. Secondly, 100% of employers don't use LinkedIn. There are some employers who are very old school and don't use it. Thirdly, the expected standard of conduct to show that you're interested in a job is to submit a resume for the opening. It would be like showing up to daily roll call in your skivvies instead of in the proper uniform of the day.
Right. Not quite there.
Yeah.
I guess LinkedIn's more of a validation tool or a validation place where people go, our recruiters can find you, but ultimately, if you want a job, you need to submit a resume. You need to walk through that resume process.
You do. In fact, when you say you're looking at a job posting in LinkedIn, much of the time when you click on the apply button, you're taken to the company's website and expected to upload a resume. Even if the position is using LinkedIn Easy Apply, you still have to submit your resume. LinkedIn is social media. And because it's social media, it's not a valid application document. And it's not a valid resume. It's, as I said, primarily for people to validate you, that you have the job history and achievements and bring the value to the table that your resume says you do. It's also more of a networking tool, again, because of social media, than it is or was ever intended to take the place of a resume.
Interesting. But what I do hear you're saying is your resume and your LinkedIn profile need to be aligned, meaning information you have on your resume needs to be on LinkedIn, and stuff you have on LinkedIn need to be in your resume. Closely aligned. Yeah.
Closely aligned, but not a one-to-one copy. So in my practice, I first create the resume. Then once the client and I have gone over it together and made any changes that need to be made, added any information that I couldn't figure out on my own, then I write the LinkedIn profile. The LinkedIn profile, in terms of the experience section, we'll just focus on that for now, is actually a condensed version of what's in the resume. What I do is take the content in the resume and make it say the same thing in slightly fewer words and as close to a late middle school, early high school reading level as I can get it. Sometimes that's easy. Sometimes that's impossible. It depends on what your role and your career line currently are. Of course, right now I'm talking to supply chain management professionals. I myself have a background in that. But say I'm working with somebody who's been in cybersecurity or nuclear their entire career. I'm not going to be able to, I want to say dumb that down, but that's not right. I'm not going to be able to make that person's resume much more basic without dumbing it down. And I don't ever want to do that.
Well, then you have if they're technical nature, that doesn't allow you to edit it in a way that the lay person can read it.
And
then
And that
You
is
know, because the technical people are reading it. So if it is dumbed
right.
down or written at a lower level, or I mean, we're probably using words that sound derogatory, but you know, it basically saying we have
They're
to
not meant to be.
we have to write it to the audience who's going to read it. You know,
Right. You again, you have to assume that the first set of human eyes to see your LinkedIn profile is going to be an entry level HR employee, or possibly an HR intern. And so they may or may not have the same amount of education that you or the hiring manager do. In addition, there's kind of a love-hate relationship between the hiring managers and human resources because you also
right?
cannot assume that HR, just because they put out a job posting, say, for a supply chain director, that they know what that person actually does. They actually get the responsibilities and skills from the hiring manager and then put them into their form, plus add a few things that they know generally scare people off. And that way naturally reduce the number of people that apply. Like they may say MBA preferred. And there are a lot of people who think just because it says MBA and I don't have one, that means I'm not qualified. The truth is, as long as you meet 50% of the qualifications, you can apply, because ATS only looks for a 50% match between the job posting and the resume.
Okay, that's very interesting. So the technology is looking for a half a match, 50% match. Then
Mm-hmm.
it gets it up, bounces it to a human person that then would
Right.
read it again. But still, that person may or may not be a technical person that understands the job. They're just trying to
Correct.
understand the
Correct.
resume.
Right. And another part of that is because we're talking to and helping people who are transitioning from military to the person who writes that resume needs to understand how to translate military speak and military jargon to layman's terms.
Right.
You can't say that you almost single-handedly coordinated the amphibious landing that ended the Balkan War in the normal terms that you would in the military. You mustered this many troops, this much material, these types of ordnance, and it was all worth that, and expect human resources to know what that means. So the way I initially said it is how I would translate all the mill speak into layman's terms on the resume. But I'd still keep it scoped. I'd say, it involved this many people, equipment, various pieces of equipment worth this much money, things like that, so that the person reading it would also understand the scope, because that way they know how much you're able to handle.
And so there you're kind of communicating the intangibles, the management, the
Yes.
leadership, the level
Yes.
of responsibility in a way that would speak
Yes.
to same like level of spend, number of people, management, or just, level of
Yeah.
responsibility you're going to get. You want to
Yeah.
just somehow articulate it.
Yeah. And, the guns and ammo and ships and people and tents and radios and whatnot, anything, whatever you needed, that translates to your inventory for that particular
Right.
mission.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. So,
Thank you.
from the resumes input into a process, half or a third of it, an electronic
Roughly.
eyeball AI is reviewing it,
Mm-hmm.
and then it gets bounced to a clerk of some sort who's going to review it again,
Mm-hmm.
to then give it finally to a hiring manager who will then understand the vocabulary on
Mm-hmm.
that resume
Mm-hmm.
before it gets there. So, building that resume. And that's what we're doing in this interview today, is we're allowing Melissa to share with us the value of building a good resume. And Melissa, I know who you are. So why don't you, if you don't mind, share a little bit. I'll bring up your contact slide here in a second, and just kind of share with people, who you are, your a little bit of your background, and then we'll continue on with the rest of the interview.
I'd love to. So I'm truly honored and humbled to be speaking with you today. My name is Melissa Kelley. I am the founder of a career strategy practice called Kelley Resumes and Wordsmithing. Within that scope, I write resumes and LinkedIn content. I also provide job and interview coaching. A little bit about my background. Prior to founding my practice, I was a supply chain professional. I worked for a little over 11 years as a buyer, specifically in the automotive industry. Most of the time I spent at General Motors. In terms of my interest in helping military and veterans, I'm from a multi-generational military family. On this continent alone, we have been serving what eventually became the United States of America since the French and Indian War. So a big part of my practice involves serving our country by serving transitioning military and veterans and helping them to start as well as continue in their civ careers.
Okay, let me bring up your slide real quick and kind of give some of your credentials. Turn this one off, but as you can see, Kelly's well qualified. Melissa, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Melissa's well qualified to help us find out exactly how we need to build a resume, and we'll talk about this towards the end again. But this is how you contact Melissa to be able to connect with her, and then we'll talk about an offer at the end where she'll work with you to help you get things together and make sure that you're starting off on the right foot. So with that, should I create a resume for every job application? You hear that you want to tailor your resume every time, so I'm constantly writing resume. Is that something I should do?
No, sir. What you should do is adjust your resume for every application. And that adjustment primarily takes place in your key skills section, which is where you concentrate your keywords. And the section immediately before that, I personally call it your showcase, but it's essentially your value proposition. It starts with the title of the job you're applying for, and then it demonstrates in a brief paragraph as well as a few bullets the value that you bring to the table, what you have to offer that particular company. You may find, based on your reading of the job description, that there's something the company seems to really want to emphasize. Maybe every other bullet mentions getting the budget in line through cost savings initiatives, or increasing the number of inventory turns from 12 per year to 3 per month, and they keep mentioning that. If so, you'll want to make sure in your showcase and as applicable in at least one of your jobs, you've got a quantified, solid achievement that shows how good you are at optimizing inventory processes, saving money on the items you purchase, reducing annual spend, whatever that might be. We'll talk about this more in a minute, but what gets scrupulously tailored from scratch to the responsibility bullets is actually your cover letter. If you find again, this process takes 30 to 45 minutes. So if you find yourself slaving away, for 3, 4, whatever hours to write a brand new resume for every job, you're either overthinking it or you're applying so often to a job that's outside the scope that your master resume was written to. Probably means you need a second resume. So, for example, let's say that you told me you want to specialize in purchasing, okay? But you've seen a few materials management jobs that interest you. And you're starting really to kind of lean more in that materials management direction. And so it's taken you a heck of a lot longer to tailor your resume. That's the point where you come back to me and say, hey, Melissa, I decided that I'm a lot more interested in materials management. Could you please, here's a few sample job postings. Could you please help me by creating a resume that's geared toward materials management roles? And of course, the same would be true if you think you more want to more be a generalist, and that would mean in Civdiv that you're going to be working for smaller companies, where you're handling everything from buying raw material to copier contracts, and you've instead realized you want to specialize in one of the areas of supply chain management instead.
So it sounds like with that is someone really needs to think about what exactly is the position they're targeting when they start their career campaign or their job campaign. I know you mentioned that before.
Yes. Okay. And it is indeed a job campaign, not a job search. Because at least if you have partnered with me, I've set you up for success and you are working from your strengths, from the high ground, rather than, as is very much the case with a job search, you're working from a needs-based, a weakness-based position. So you're down on the plains and your competitors are up on top of the ridge. And, as top of the ridge is where you need to be to succeed.
Right.
So, yes, you really need to take the time to think about what you want to do. If you create or find somebody willing to create a generic or general resume for you, you have wasted your investment because those do not get results. Those don't get through the applicant tracking system. My suggestion is always that you should spend your career doing something that you really enjoy. Because then it's not a job. You're getting up every day and getting to do something that you really like. So as you consider what direction you want to go after you are discharged, after you retire, whatever your case may be, think about what your favorite part of whatever it is that you do as a supply chain professional in your branch of the service might be. And a good way to figure that out is, one, if it's something that while you're doing it, the time just flies by. You just get lost in doing it. For some very lucky people, it might even be something that they have enjoyed doing and been really good at since they were kids. That's when the automotive industry collapsed. That's how I wound up doing what I do now. I had that exact talk with myself. Said, I want to spend the rest of my life doing something that I know I enjoy. So what was that? I've always loved writing. I've always enjoyed editing. And so that's how I turned to self-employment and how I come to be speaking to you today.
It sounds like you're. It sounds like we're building that value proposition that you talked about a little bit earlier. And when I hear value proposition as a way to figure out what is your value proposition, everybody has a reputation, something you're known for.
Yes.
So to kind of figure out what that is, think
That's
about
part of it.
when people come to you every single day, they ask you probably the same 5 to 10 questions, either different people asking you the same question because you have a reputation.
Yeah, that's a great way too.
That's one way. Yes. Yeah, one way to figure out why people know you or how people know you is like you're the person that does, in your case, edits and writes really, really well. So if we got to do something technical, I need to talk to Melissa. Which kind of talks about our next question.
And that's another aspect to it. Yes.
And why is it important? Well, we're talking about that. The next question we wanted to kind of bring up to our audience is why is it important to tailor resume for each job application? I know we're not creating a new resume, but we want to tailor it a little bit, like you said. We're adjusting it, but not rewriting it.
Correct. The reason why is because that optimizes your resume's chances of getting through the applicant tracking system. That makes the correlation between the hard and soft skills in your key skills section as high as possible to the job posting. And I've said this term key skills section a few times, and I want to take the initiative to explain this. Some people think that your resume is like what's called an SEO document. In other words, that a given keyword like inventory control has to repeat a certain number of times throughout the entire resume, and that the applicant tracking system actually reads the entire resume. It, in fact, does not. What it does is it specifically looks for a heading in the resume titled Key Skills. And then it looks for a list of hard and soft skills that are in that job posting. So when I write a resume for a client, I create what I call a master resume. So the client sends me, say, 3 sample job postings. I reverse engineer them to understand what keywords and key phrases keep appearing. So sticking with the inventory control theme. The most captain obvious is inventory control, right? Possibly budget management, so on and so forth. So I'm seeing, okay, what words, what phrases appear in every one of the job postings this person has sent me. How many of them appear at least in 2? Then what has the person told me they're really, really good at? That all goes into creating that key skills section. The standard set of hard and of soft skills would be things like relationship building, being able to collaborate cross-functionally. So that means you work well, not to run down the hall with scissors, point up, right? You don't steal your coworker's lunch. So in other words, you get along well with accounting, with sales, with the people on the manufacturing floor, be they union, be they not union. Things like that. That's cross-functional collaboration. Also, the ability to communicate both verbally and in writing is kind of a standard soft skill. So you start with those 3, and then you look for other things that seem to be important when tailoring the resume. And again, I do the same thing when I create the master set of keywords. So the goal is that when I create your master set of keywords, mainly what you're going to be doing is removing keywords to optimize the alignment, not having to add keywords to optimize the alignment. You'll also want to make sure that the job title, which is like a headline immediately beneath your contact information, matches the job title in the job application, and if needed, adjust your value proposition statement, your showcase, slightly. You don't necessarily need to do that. And we are focusing on keywords. So to kind of sum it up, you want as high a correlation as possible between the keywords in your resume and the keywords in the specific job you're applying to make sure you get through the applicant tracking system. Again, just like in order to get on a base or even into certain areas of a base, you have to have the right credentials. You have to have the right security clearance. It's a pretty close, what I'm explaining with the applicant tracking system and the keywords is a pretty close parallel.
So that was my next question. I was going to bring this question. We had a little bit later, but I want to bring it up because we keep mentioning it over and over. It seems like we need to really understand what is an applicant tracking system. Yes. When we consider building a resume, because this is a key tool that the HR departments use.
Yes.
To weed out the thousands down to the hundreds, or even the hundreds down to the tens.
Correct.
So that they can be more easily managed. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, share us more.
Yep. So a little bit of history. The applicant tracking system, as I mentioned earlier, is an artificial intelligence-based, albeit not very smart, screening computer. And they came about during the global economic downturn that started back in 2008-ish. And the reason why was because so many people were out of work. There were, as you just said a second ago, Randy, thousands and thousands and thousands of people applying to jobs, walking into the doors of a business, figuring out what the secretary's extension was and either dialing one up or one down to get the voicemail of the boss. And it was untenable. So this system, the ATS, started being invested in and implemented by more and more companies to screen out as many candidates as possible. And of course, that's when online job applications became the main way to apply for a job or be considered for a job other than through networking. So today, applicant tracking systems are a standard part of the hiring process for pretty much all but the very smallest startups. So you have to have a resume that gets through the applicant tracking system if you want to have any chance whatsoever of getting an interview for the job you've applied to. And there are tools that once you've tailored your resume, you can use to check how well your resume corresponds. You need to take these tools with about half a shaker of salt, though, because they're fronts for resume writing companies. Two that I personally like to use, one more than the other, are Resume Worded and Job Scan. I prefer Resume Worded to Job Scan, simply because I like the way it presents the keywords better. I'll tell you up front, both tools will make me look like a liar in terms of my saying a resume is not an SEO document, meaning a given keyword has to appear X number of times for you to get through ATS. And the reason why I say that is because whichever of these tools you use, when they analyze your resume and tell you how well it matches the posting, they're going to show you, well, purchasing appears 20 times in your resume and appears 50 times in a job posting, for instance. And that doesn't matter except for the fact of showing how important it is that that word or phrase, say purchasing leadership or purchasing strategy, be in that key skills section. They do, as I said, they purposely skew your resume low, which is why you want to take it with a grain, with several grains of salt, what they say, because what they're wanting to do is for you to have the service they front do your resume for you. So as long as your resume is around 50%, you're going to do fine. Of course, the closer to 85, 90% you are, the better. But just so you know, these websites are going to tell you, again, they're going to try to make me out to be a liar. They're going to tell you, oh no, you're not even going to be considered unless you have at least an 85% match, or whatever that particular website says, to the job posting. Please just trust me and know, as long as there's a 50% correlation, your probability of getting through the applicant tracking system is very good. And of course, the better the match, the greater the probability. And one last reminder, you're focusing on that key skills section, not the entire resume, just the key skills section. So briefly, why I like resume worded is because in addition to a list of the words that it found, it actually shows you the job posting and highlights the words that it found. And the reason why that's important is because it's not just single words. A lot of times it's 2 or 3 word key phrases, like purchasing strategy,
Okay.
Vendor management, things like that.
And so that would kind of brings us around to the next question, was how can a candidate customize their resume for a specific job posting to get past this, this key gateway, this ATS system, in a way that I would offer from my point of view is I don't look like a robot, just hit the keywords. I not only communicate my skills are good enough,
Right.
but then it starts to talk about those values, the value resume that you and I've talked about in the past.
Right. So we're turning from keywords to the showcase, to the value proposition, or should I speak a little bit more about how to figure out what the keywords are?
Well, I would say, we got to get through the keywords, right? We have to get found first. We got to get past that first step, or else it doesn't matter what our value statement is, because no one's going to read it anyway.
So let me start with this. There's a few different ways to skin the cat that is the key skills section, namely looking at the job posting and figuring out which keywords and key phrases need to be in your key skills section. For instance, let's say your master resume has, because some of the job postings you sent me are more general supply chain postings. So your master key skills list has, say, materials management in it, maybe has forecasting in it. And you're applying to a pure purchasing role where you're going to be analyzing the responses, the responses to the request for proposal, request for bid, request for quote, whatever the company calls it, and making the decision which supplier is going to get the contract. And let's say that job does not contain the word material management anywhere in it, as you manually read it. So you don't need to have materials management in the resume you submit for that job. So you can manually list each of the skills, both hard and soft, that as a supply chain professional, you already know are part of what you do in that given aspect of supply chain management. And then remove and or add skills to your key skills section to align your resume as closely as possible with the job posting. Another way to do it is this: using some of the, using, for example, Resume Worded or Job Scan. There are a couple other tools, websites that do the same thing as well. Submit your current resume, your master resume, and the job posting. And, it'll tell you how good the match is. It'll also tell you what words are the most important. Definition of most important is how many times they appear in the job postings. So say something appears 20 times in the job posting, it is purchasing related. It's not the word and. You want it in your key skills section. So you adjust the key skills section, again, both hard and soft skills, based on the initial evaluation. And then you run the adjusted resume and the same job posting through that tool again. And your score should have significantly increased. And if it did, kudos, you're ready to apply for the job. Now, talking in terms of the value proposition section, and of course the job title, you would want to carefully read the required and preferred bullets. And if you notice something that isn't in your value proposition, but that you are the world's best at, it's one of the things you do best. Put it into your value proposition as one of the bullets. So let me explain how that construction a little bit more. So the value proposition starts out with a high-level paragraph that gives, that communicates a bit of your background, some of your strengths, a little bit of scope. You've handled budgets up to $150 million. You've managed teams of 20, whatever, could be larger, could be smaller. You have global experience, not only in the United States, but also in Europe, Asia, Middle East, whatever. Many companies today are global, and your deployments or service at overseas bases, that counts as global experience, work experience. And then what you want to do is put 3, maybe 4 bullets that highlight what you do best while you're doing that thing you do. So maybe you are an ace negotiator. You know, perhaps throughout your military career, you have mentored and coached your subordinates to significant promotions. You know, maybe you're excellent at finding ways, you know, and therefore ways to improve processes, efficiencies, things like that. You're going to want to have bullets, and I do put those in your master resume, that highlight those. But when, like I said, if you want to really make that section shine for a specific job, if there's something in the required responsibilities that isn't clearly addressed already in that showcase, or even better, something in the section that says preferred or extra credit or bonus points to you if, you know, and again, it's something that's you to a T, make sure that it's one of those bullets. You can reword it if you want, or put it into the resume exactly the way it is in the job posting. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And it only increases your match, because sometimes the ATS does look at that showcase in addition to the key skills statement. And by the way, part of how I get that showcase, the material for that showcase from a client, is I will ask you questions that elicit what you're really good at, the value you bring to the company. One of my questions literally asks you, with the understanding that the salary you are wanting to be paid is an investment for the company, asks you to justify why you are worth, say, a $300,000 salary or whatever it is. And you'd be amazed the kind of good material that I get just from that question alone. But that's ultimately what you're trying to communicate in those value bullets. You know, in order to help motivate HR to give your resume to your future boss, and B, your future boss to look at your full resume and ultimately pick up the phone and ask HR to start the interview process with you.
So one of the things you mentioned a couple of times is you have a resume, but then there's a cover letter. So the resume gets us through the ATS to this eyeballs of this hiring manager. How does the cover letter work in this?
Well, there's a couple of main ways the cover letter works, you know, and sometimes you'll come across articles online where a recruiter or HR is saying, we don't understand why people send in cover letters. They're a waste of time.
I've heard that several times. That's one of the reasons I wanted to ask that question.
Yeah. That is not true. And cover letters are not a waste of time, because what the recruiter, HR person, whatever, making that statement does not understand. It's not all about them. What I mean by that is the cover letter is not meant for human resources. You are writing that cover letter to the hiring manager, your future boss, as a way to introduce yourself. So the cover letter, as I just said, gives the hiring manager an idea, you know, not only an idea of who you are, the value you bring, you know, in a much more abbreviated form, obviously, they're one page, and a couple highlights of your achievements. But it also communicates how well aligned you are for that given job. So even though I may have provided you with a master cover letter, which is always written from your resume based on your resume content, it just basically gives you an idea of how a cover letter should be written, what it should look like. When you apply to each job, you're actually creating a brand new cover letter. You do wind up using some parts of the master cover letter, but 80% of it should be completely new material. And you get that material again from the required and recommended or preferred, I should say, bullets in that job posting. And you also want to read very carefully anything that says who you are, or what you're like, or who we're looking for. And that's usually in paragraph style. You'll want to show how much you are indeed that person as possible. And there are a few different ways to do that. One, which I normally recommend for people who are more entry level, but it could be used in a more senior resume, is literally making a T-chart, if you will, copying the relevant bullet from the resume and copying the relevant bullet from the job posting, my apologies. And then and then right across from it, pulling something from your resume, you'll probably reword it a bit, that shows this is how I meet this requirement. You may want to do that, for a few of them. And then, oh, by the way, as a bonus, I can do this, it's tied to something in the preferred section. Or, you can do it in a more traditional cover letter manner by doing the same thing, except in paragraph style. And what you're basically doing is rewriting the bullets in the job posting that best apply to you in first person. So now it sounds like you're saying them, so, I was considered, for the last 5 years, I have achieved the largest amount of cost reductions in my department. Of course, depending on the branch you're in, that's going to be, your platoon, your squadron, your wing, whatever. But all of those pretty much translate to department in the civilian world. And
Right.
That might correspond with, that might align very closely to identically with a bullet that says, you need to have a track record of achieving strong, significant cost savings every year. Well, this is my average percentage across, the last 5 years. My goal, I was asked to achieve 5% cost reductions every year, and my average was 30%. And I mean, that's a bonanza for the company you're applying to, right?
Right.
And when you do that more traditional format, you want to make sure that you include in condensed version 3 to 4 of the achievements from your experience section. What I normally do when I'm creating the master letter is I'll look at the client's 3 most recent jobs, and I'll pull what I consider to be the strongest achievement, which of course usually means biggest numbers attached to it, and put that into the cover letter. I won't put it word for word from the resume, but I'll say maybe achieved 30% in cost reductions by centralizing and condensing the supply base. It's a very common tactic in the civilian world. I've had clients who've done very similar in the military world. For instance, instead of getting, all the radios and linens for the base from somebody in the United States, when the base is in Germany, they find somebody in Germany that meets mil spec and gets whatever the items are from them, and as many of that type of item as possible. I mean, obviously that's an immediate savings on shipping costs.
Right.
And a lot of times the per piece price is also lower because you're not dealing with suppliers who have managed to get away for decades with charging $9,000 for a doggone screw. So
it sounds like because we're kind of coming to the end of our time, I wanted to, there's a lot of technical parts of building a resume. When someone's seeking a professional resume writer, what should they look for? So when someone's seeking a resume writer, what should they look for?
First and foremost, it's important to understand that a resume writer is not a glorified secretary. A resume is what I call a personal marketing document. It's the tool that gets you interviews. So you need somebody who A, knows how to write resumes, B, preferably has professional credentials to back it up. That's like the difference between having an accountant do your taxes, which is totally fine, and in most cases works great, and having a CPA do your taxes, which is what because I own a business, use at tax time, to make sure that every I is dotted and every T is crossed. Similarly, the difference between using, Joe Smith, who advertises on Fiverr that they're a great resume writer, and using somebody like me, who's put in the study and sweat and hard work to earn and maintain the Certified Professional Resume Writer Credential, CPRW, and that's the most common one, is like that same difference between using an accountant and a CPA for your taxes. It's your sign, your signal that person knows what they're doing. Secondly, you want to make sure that person, no matter their approach to writing resumes, writes resumes that are achievement focused. So often I'll talk to somebody and I'll say, yeah, I had this resume professionally written and I don't understand why I'm not getting interviews. And I look at the thing and the resume writer has just copied and pasted the person's job description for every job, instead of that high level overview of duties followed by achievements, and or what they represent as achievements are really additional duties, or they don't have, dollars, percentages, number reduce, number increase, in other words, actual numbers and figures and data to show how big the achievement was. And a lot of times the resumes don't have a key skills section. So you want to make sure that the resume writer operates on all of those cylinders and creates a resume that meets all those aspects. Also, the resume needs to be written in Word. Make sure you're not working with somebody who uses Google Docs or says, oh yeah, I make these beautiful resumes in Illustrator. Let me show you. Those don't get through the applicant tracking system for a number of reasons. And I know we're out of time. That maybe is a topic we can talk about in the future. But always ask,
design.
what do you create your resumes in? And the
I
answer
think
should always be Word.
In one way, I think to screen through the people who claim to be resume writers, because you have all these different tools, and everyone, just like I could cut grass, everyone all of a sudden they can write resumes. Just that CPRW, that certified professional designation, will help somebody weed through all the different things out there to find somebody who has a base of knowledge to write
who has a base of knowledge. Or at minimum, they belong to a professional resume writing association like Career Directors International, National Resume Writers Association, Professional Association of Resume Writers and Career Coaches. Those are the three biggies. I don't, however, want to discount people who are excellent resume writers but aren't certified, and they do exist. In fact, one of my first and longest professional mentors is not certified, but she has decades of HR experience, so from that perspective, she's excellent.
But if you're shopping for a professional, and the reason, just like you brought up earlier, you have these screening tools or ways, and I can even talk to my own personal experience where I paid somebody to write a resume that looked beautiful with my job descriptions and achievements cut and pasted and then formatted, but it was useless. Wasn't able to get any kind of offer or position from that resume. Working with professionals is key.
It shouldn't be your current resume just cut and pasted into a fancy new document. That said, there's no need to reinvent the wheel and have every single word be original. I mean, if there's good content in your resume, I'm going to use it, but it's still the focus needs to be not on what you did or what you do, but what you accomplished within the capacity and normal expectations of that role in terms of what makes a good supply chain management professional. Whether you're a generalist or specialist.
It sounds like, based on our conversation today, that there's a process to this that allows you to come to that final product. So it takes everything, not only your original resume, your career goals, the job descriptions, keywords, putting all this together.
Correct.
And there's a process to come up with that final product. And that's one of the reasons we want, people to work with a professional like Melissa is to do that. And before, one last questions, and then we'll kind of let people know how to work with you. And this one's kind of off the cuff, is what are you really seeing right now with your clients in regards to the job market? What's working? How are people getting jobs? Are people getting hired? What does that look like right now from your client's perspective?
Absolutely, people are getting hired. In fact, speaking of processes, and obviously we're not going into detail on mine today, my process is unique, that instead of having to wait until they get the final draft of their resume, my clients are able to start applying for jobs and get interviews with the first draft of their resume, and sometimes even get jobs before the project is wrapped up. So, obviously that's important. The sooner you get irons into the fire, the sooner you have a new job. But circling back to the actual question, what works to land a job is, first of all, to understand your resume. Its sole purpose is to get you an interview. It does not get you a job. What gets you a job is your networking and interviewing skills. So what I mean by that is this. It's not enough just to send your application out through the interwebs and wait. Instead, you need to take the time to do some due diligence on the company, actually, even before you apply. Because this should be a situation where you're deciding which companies deserve to receive a copy of your resume and your application. But that said, once you've done that and you've applied, you need to make sure within your due diligence that you have figured out which people within that company are most likely to be the hiring manager. And then you email or send a LinkedIn message that hiring manager with a copy of your resume and just a brief note letting them know, hey, I just applied for your logistics director opening, and this is why I'm qualified. Here's a copy of my resume. I'd, love to meet with you and chat further about my qualifications. Because a lot of times the applicant tracking system in HR reject a resume that should never have been rejected. In this way, the hiring manager is able to resurrect your resume. So that would be the biggest tip that I could give is, in addition to applying for the job, if you're doing it primarily through online applications, you look up, it'll usually be 3 or 4 people who might be the hiring manager, unless you're at the VP level and that's going to be the CEO.
Right.
And reach
out.
Those
are smaller circles, right? Those are smaller circles. So they're going to know who you are, right? Those CEOs know who the other CEOs are, and they know who their lieutenants are, their vice presidents are.
Right, exactly. Well, the CEO, in many situations where, say, you're going for vice president of purchasing, you're probably going to be reporting to the president or maybe the chief financial officer. I mean, it's going to be 1, maybe 2, but at a lower level, say a purchasing manager or a commodity manager, something like that, there might be 3 or 4 different people who you're into whose deck of products your commodity might fit into. That said, I need the audience to understand something very clearly. Only 20% of jobs are landed through an online application, or I actually should say only 20% of interviews are landed. The other 80% is networking. So it's also important to be keeping people civilian counterparts, people you served with who are already in your line of work, somebody you're connected with on LinkedIn, even if the last time you spoke to them was in middle school, who just happens to work for the company you're applying to.
Right.
Reach out to them. And, take advantage of that connection, to help grease the skids so that you get an interview.
Okay. Well, it sounds like definitely working with a professional such as yourself is a key way to get organized and get started. And
it's essential. It really is.
She's kind enough to allow us to get a free consult. And I just want to bring up that slide for folks. So when people get a consult with you, what can they expect that experience to be like? What would they get when they register and get the chance to chat with you? What would they benefit from?
Thanks for asking. I love doing consults, actually. The first thing the consult, expect it to last 45 minutes-ish. And it will start first of all, with a review of your resume. And I'll explain usually the two biggest areas that need to be changed. For a military professional, one of those is going to be turning the mill speak into layman's terms.
Right. Absolutely.
I'm a military brat. What I don't by osmosis know the meaning of, I know where to look to get it. And then secondly, I'll get to know you a little bit better. In particular, where you most think you need help. Of course, what you want to do moving forward. And from there, talk with you about the solution that, in my professional judgment, I think would best fit. For most military clients, I do recommend what I call a complete document portfolio, which is a brand new resume, master cover letter, and revamped LinkedIn content, plus coaching. You know what it takes to get promotions in the military. You don't have any idea whatsoever what it takes to get those civilian interviews and job offers. And along with my very structured resume writing process, I also have a turnkey, equally structured job and interview coaching system that I am basically handing you the toolbox, showing you what's in the toolbox, and showing you how to use them. All you got to do is go out the door and use them, and you will not only get interviews, you'll ace them and properly negotiate salary and land that job offer.
Okay.
And
Well,
I do
I'm going to bring
offer a military discount. My military discount is 15%. So, you want to keep that in mind as well. And ultimately, if you want to get that consultation link directly, just text me at 720-588-9793 and I'll shoot it back to you. Because
I just brought up a slide of your contact.
Yeah. So again, all you need to do is text me and I'll send you a clickable link.
Is that the best way to connect with you? Is it texting?
Initially,
or would you prefer LinkedIn?
Okay. So the reason why I mentioned that is the process always starts with a consultation. Nothing happens without a consultation. And of course, accepting and paying for a quotation. So what I'm trying to say is a few ways to get a clickable version of that link that's on the slide. Is one way, of course, is to send me a message via LinkedIn. You can also email me. You can text me, or you can go to my website. And just about every page of my website, which I will admit needs some updating, has a button that if you click it, you'll be able to schedule a consultation. So I guess ultimately, I said all that to say I do have various ways for you to get an active copy of my consultation link. The quickest way I will most likely respond is text. But you can also use email or LinkedIn, or if you want to take the initiative and just go ahead and get that set up yourself, visit my website and click the button that lets you schedule a consult. That link is also, by the way, in my LinkedIn profile.
Okay. Well, we've had a lot of information today, more information
Yeah, I feel
about
like I've
resumes than I've
fed you
heard
through a fire hose.
anyone. It was a lot of information, which is great. That's exactly the kind of information we want to get to folks. And
Yeah, it's
everyone,
important.
you know how to contact Melissa, LinkedIn or her text. And we brought up the slide a couple times. Plus, it'll be in a link and it'll be in the description of the video for you to
Oh,
take a look at
perfect.
as well. Clickable links so that people can find that
Perfect.
information.
Yeah,
So,
and like I said,
go ahead.
there's no need to email me first or send me a message first. If you've got a clickable version of that link, hit it and set
Click it.
the consultation.
Okay. Well, I appreciate everyone's time today. This will, so once you get a chance to reach out to Melissa, definitely reach out and get
Yep.
your resume consult, and start to understand more about how you are being presented right now. And that's where Melissa is going to give you a lot of value. And then from there, she can help
Yes.
you transform that into something that's going to get you results. And that's what you want at the end of the day, is the results.
Correct.
So
Yep.
with that, let everyone go, and we'll talk to you soon.